What's up, everybody? My name is Isaac Huss, and today I'd like to discuss how to properly discern a vocation. Yes, this is a video for CatholicMatch, where our goal is to help you find the love of your life for your happily ever after. But if your happily ever after happens to include a sacramental marriage, well, buddy, that there's vocation. A true call from Almighty God Himself. And because there are indeed other vocations to which we might be called, this requires some level of discernment. And frankly, if you have not done any vocational discernment before jumping into the dating pool, well, you might just be putting the cart before the proverbial horse. Now, don't worry, I won't be trying to recruit any people to be priests or nuns today. But there is a non-insignificant number of couples who experience some failure to launch or some hiccups along the way as a result of one or both halves of this equation not properly discerning whether they may have been called to a higher calling, if you will. I would even go so far as to say that even if your goal is already very clearly to get married, and even if it fairly quickly becomes abundantly clear you're not called to do anything else, you will be better able to answer that call to marriage and find someone to do it with you if you first take the time to properly discern what vocation God is actually calling you to. So, with that in mind, let's talk about how to properly discern God's vocation for us so as to better and more confidently pursue the right one. But first, I want to share a little background. No, I'm not a priest, nor am I an advanced level theologian, but I did do some extensive vocational discernment myself, namely 4 years in the college seminary, and I learned a whole lot along the way. As a kid, I had zero interest in becoming a priest. In fact, it was quite the opposite. The idea that God would invite, aka order me by divine fiat to be a professional church guy who couldn't get married, that was quite off-putting and frankly a little scary. That was not at all attractive to me. And if I had anything to say about it, it was simply not going to happen, regardless of what my mother and all the other pious church ladies had to say about it. Conversely, I always felt a strong pull towards marriage and family life, and as long as I can remember, that's what I wanted for my life, and that's what I expected to happen in my life. And that was the case all the way up through my high school graduation. That is when things changed ever so slightly, though. Instead of going to college right away, I decided to do a gap year where I would travel around the country with other young adults, doing church retreats for teenagers with a group called Net Ministries. It was fun, it was amazing, and it was also quite transformative. And particularly, I gained a better and, dare I say, more mature understanding of what God's will means for us. Instead of thinking of God's will as simply a man up in the sky declaring what my life is going to be like, regardless of what I want, it seemed that the closer that I followed the Lord and tried to mold my life accordingly, the more my horizons were broadened in terms of what I wanted to do with my life and what I even considered myself capable of doing. And it really helped me to shift my understanding of God's will from something like a man in the sky dictating orders down to earth and much more of a relationship of how I can best love Him and love other people as well. And that all led me to believe that maybe I should give the priesthood a closer look. So I decided to enroll in the college seminary at the local Catholic university, where I could get a good education while also discerning God's will in my life and being better prepared for a potential vocation to the priesthood or a different vocation. I will admit, however, that I did not expect to stay very long, maybe a semester or two. I pictured some member of the formation staff would pull me aside and say, hey, yeah, maybe perhaps you've noticed you're not nearly as nerdy and churchy as the rest of the guys around here. Why don't you go out into the world and flirt with some girls for the rest of your college career? Turns out the church is actually looking for normal guys to become priests. And it became abundantly clear that I had a whole lot more to learn about the priesthood, about discernment, about what it just meant to be a grown-up, mature Catholic man. But perhaps the most surprising thing in this whole process is that I actually grew attracted to the priesthood in some way. I developed a love for the priesthood, and even I found myself being humbled by the possibility that God might be calling me to be a priest for his people. Ultimately, however, my lifelong desires for marriage and for children didn't dissipate through all this, but only grew ever more stronger as I learned more about the sacrificial and sacramental nature of the vocation, and that just became more crystallized in my mind and heart. And along the way, I gained a greater sense of where I find myself to be most passionately interested in evangelizing, and that was particularly from a more lay perspective as opposed to being a clergyman. So yeah, I did end up spending my full 4 years of college at the seminary discerning a potential call to the priesthood, but ultimately deciding to leave seminary formation to pursue what I understand to be a call to marriage and family. So with that all as a backdrop, here are 7 insights I gained along the way for properly discerning a vocation. Number 1, you cannot discern on your own. The Catholic Church actually does consider vocational discernment to be something of a group effort, or perhaps more to the point, a two-way street. A man, for instance, might think he's called to be a priest, or a woman called to be a nun. But if the church, and namely the local bishop or the religious superior, doesn't think that's true, then it's not, and vice versa. In other words, the individual discerns his or her desire. The church discerns whether he or she is a good candidate, and both need to be true for there to be a vocation. Number 2, individuals can be very helpful in this process and sometimes not. I was the classic seminarian where I would seek out every wise or holy priest I could find and see if they would be able to help me crack the code or solve the riddle in a way that I hadn't quite figured out yet. But I also learned that even good holy priests or others, while they can help you discern, they can't do your discernment for you. In fact, if I ever encountered somebody who was significantly more confident in my own destiny than I was, well, I should probably look at that advice with a little bit of skepticism at least. If nothing else, individual voices, helpful as they may be, should always be considered in light of the timeless Catholic truths and specifically the official local programs and processes. Number 3, you cannot discern what you don't know or understand. A very necessary part of my own discernment was simply just coming to a better understanding of what the priesthood actually is and what it would actually be like to be a priest. I was able to live with priests. I was able to learn from them and observe them. I was able to go to daily mass and holy hour, regular confession and spiritual direction. I mastered the liturgy of the hours, which is no small thing. Number 4, God speaks through our natural abilities and desires. It's been said that the most basic tenet of vocational discernment is simply, do you desire to pursue that vocation? Not because you think it's generally good or a holy person would do that thing, or the church needs you, or you're concerned about the consequences if you don't, or you're worried about letting people down, maybe even your own mother. Now, if you have a decent sense that you could do it, that you'd be happy doing it, that you would be good at it, or at least good at certain aspects of it, that's all really good data and can certainly help your discernment. But that's still not sufficient for what we would understand as a true vocation. You do have to have the power to do it, yes, but also the desire to do it. And you need both to be a true vocation. Number 5, discernment is very practical. You can sit atop a mountain and think all you want about what you want to do with your life. You could sit up there and pray all you want as well, but true discernment happens when you actually take practical steps in the direction of your goal. It's not at all unlike feeling a call to marriage. So cool, you want to get married. Well, you actually have to find somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with. And that person has to want to spend the rest of his or her life with you. And you have to have a healthy relationship. And you have to have goals that match up. And so on and so on. You might even say that you can't even properly discern marriage unless you have someone else to discern with together. Similarly, I've heard it said that you can't really properly discern the priesthood until you enroll and move in to the seminary. Until then, you're pretty much just discerning whether you should go to seminary. Now, that's not to say that every last one of us needs to enter a seminary or a convent to try it out and properly discern it. But if you do find yourself to be legitimately attracted to any of those things, I would absolutely recommend that you seek out a formal conversation with a priest and go from there. In other words, I think the best way to discern something is to actually try it out, even if it's just the very first step, and see if God blesses that. Which leads me to number 6. All discernment should be rooted in God's love and in relationship with Him. It was St. Augustine who famously said, "Love God and then do whatever you want." And yeah, honestly, if that seems wrong or overly simplistic to us or far-fetched, that might just mean that we're not doing the love God part enough. It was something of a constant temptation for me to approach discernment like it was a riddle to be solved or a code to crack or even a far-off treasure that I had to uncover someplace. And then, I grew frustrated when all of the holy sages I sought out didn't have the answers, or maybe they didn't have the answers that I wanted to hear. So allow me to recommend a different approach. Start by meditating on the awesome, incredible fact that the Lord of the universe created us, has a plan for us from the very beginning, wants us to be happy, and wants what's best for us. And that the real authentic desires of our hearts are not simply accessories or to be subjugated in favor of religious, churchy things. But instead, we can understand that these things were placed on our hearts by God Himself, and that they can serve as indicators of what God wants for us and has always wanted for us. And finally, number 7, discernment is for life. Hate to break it to you, but there won't be a point where we're just done discerning. Even if we've decided what we're going to do with the rest of our life, even when we are starting our lives as priests or as married people or as nuns or as monks or what have you. Our entire lives, indeed, should be spent seeking the Lord in prayer and trying to understand what His will is for us on a daily basis, long-term, short-term. And so, if you do find yourself called to marriage, I recommend that you find somebody who gets that, who is on board to discern the awesome, mysterious will of God for the rest of your shared lives together. All right, that's all I got for today. What do you think, though? Any insights you have into discerning marriage, priesthood, religious life? Big things, small things? What's worked for you? Any advice that you've gotten that's helped? Anything that has been bad advice that you'd recommend we avoid? That's what that comment section below is for. We'd love to hear your feedback on this video, any ideas for future videos. And make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any. You can even sign up for alerts if you prefer. And thanks so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you very soon.